wanted to come on here today, me and Mr. Axel, to talk about some of the hard talks, especially to have with kids. I mean, it's not hard to tell them not to do something, but it can be hard to actually have a productive conversation about the whys and why nots of some things. Today's discussion is going to relate to several of our words of the week, not the least of which come to mind are discipline, doing your best, patience, learning to accept, and compassion, caring for others. So basically what we're on here to talk about today is I'd had a video requested. Hi, Miss Rose. I had a video request to do something about addiction. Now, addiction is something that I have suffered with in my life and over several different things and finally managed to overcome them. But it can be a hard thing to talk about with kids because some people may be surprised to realize that many of the things listed by the American Psychological Association as addictive substances or behaviors are not regulated in any way, shape, or form. Even their advertisements are not regulated and can be directed at kids. So it's important for us as parents and us as mentors for children to look out for the kind of things that could cause them issues of dependency later in life. I don't think any of us really want to watch our kids suffer with a dependency issue, no matter what it might be. So I got a few ones I'm going to talk about here, but before we get started, Mr. Axel, I wanted to ask you, do you know what addiction means?
No.
Not really? Okay. So, well, then there goes my next question of what does addiction mean to you? Well, addiction is basically an uncontrollable urge to do or use something despite the fact that you might be hurting yourself or other people. Addiction is a biopsychological disorder that makes it so that you don't really care. You get so much of a good feeling from doing something that you don't really care if it hurts other people. Let me ask you, as a young child, does that sound like a very, very cool thing? To be addicted to something, dependent on it for the rest of your life? No. And addictions can be very, very hard to fight because they are psychological disorders, and some people are more predisposed to it than others based on genetics. I know I am very predisposed to addictive behavior. It's something that I constantly have to watch out for on myself. Now, the American Psychological Association lists several things for both adults and children. I was going to list a few. Obviously, top two, these are ones you've probably heard about since you were young: alcohol and nicotine, right? Some of the other ones that some people find more surprising are like gambling, gaming, and even caffeine. Now, here's the thing about addictive behavior that I've learned in my struggles with addiction over the years is that it's not about not using something. It's about making sure that if you do use something, that you do it in moderation. And what that means is only doing it for short periods of time, making sure you take breaks. We talk about that with gaming quite a bit, don't we?
Yes, sir.
How many times have you seen me fall into a bit of an addiction with a video game and sit there and waste 6 hours of a day?
I have.
You have seen me do that, haven't you? Told you. I have issues with addictive behavior sometimes, right? And even though I should have been doing other things like housework, but if it starts to mess with your ability to accomplish your normal tasks and responsibilities, such as housework or regular work or your friendships or your family relationships, that's when it becomes a problem. It becomes a real problem, and that's when you're facing addiction, right? So I kind of zeroed in on one of these things and did a bunch of research this morning, and this is also something that I've struggled with addiction on, and it is the leading cause of addiction in children today. The American Psychological Association estimates through studies and surveys that about 35 to 40% of kids under the age of 18 suffer from addiction to caffeine. Did you know that?
No.
Yes, suffer from addiction to the caffeine. Now, there's lots of different side effects that this can have. Some of them seem positive on the surface, but are actually quite negative when it comes to the development of the brain and physiological functions of a child. So I looked at, number one first, what is a safe amount of caffeine for somebody? Basically, for kids age 6 to 11, that would be Mr. Axel's age here, the safe amount of caffeine is about 40 milligrams per day. 40 milligrams per day is the equivalent of one 12-ounce pop. That's it. Any more than that can begin to cause addictive feelings and addictive behaviors. I thought, wow, that's such a lower amount than I thought it was. For kids age 12 to 17, more like 100 milligrams, which is really just two 12-ounce pops a day or a couple of cups of coffee. For adults, it's a little bit higher, more like 250 milligrams to 300 milligrams. Outside of that, it starts to become unsafe physiologically for us. So that's when it really gets dangerous. They say for kids age 6 to 11, at 2 times 50 milligrams, that's two 12-ounce pops a day, it starts to get dangerous. Some of the side effects of caffeine usage and addiction are insomnia and bad sleeping cycles. So I think some of us as adults understand just how bad a rough sleeping cycle is for one's fatigue and mental health. It can cause one to start feeling more anxious, depressed, and tired. And actually, one of the things I came across was there was a study not long ago done with middle school and high school children that found that use of 100 milligrams of caffeine per day, which they thought would help them with their sporting events and their schoolwork, actually showed them performing at about 40% less, 30 to 40% less of their normal ability after consuming this much caffeine for 5 days in a row, due to the fact that they weren't sleeping as well. They were falling asleep, but they were going straight to deep sleep and weren't cycling through the REM and deep sleep cycles. So they stopped dreaming, and then they stopped resting, and they would wake up feeling just as tired as they went to bed, and they would think that caffeine would be the answer for that. So they would continue to drink caffeine, so it builds a self-cycle of addiction. So they would drink the caffeine to try to feel woke up, but in all reality, caffeine doesn't reduce fatigue. It reduces your perception of that fatigue. Your body is still actually fatigued. Your brain is still actually fatigued. It just attacks the centers of the brain that perceive that fatigue, that notice that fatigue, and it actually just cycles on to getting worse until the performance actually do get much, much worse. Oops, no wonder my doctor kept telling me I drink way too much coffee. Yes, this is an actual issue, right? Insomnia, bad sleeping cycles. Another thing that it causes is agitation, and aggressive behavior. So this is really any kind of addiction, but caffeine is really big about this. If a child, say 6 to 11 years old, drinks more than 50 milligrams of caffeine a day for 3 to 5 days, they will start to become more aggressive, they will start to become more moody, they will start to become more irritable, and they will be more likely to argue with parents, teachers, and authority figures. Did you know that?
No.
So think about other times that maybe you found yourself being in a bit of a bad mood and a big argumentative. Do you think maybe it could have been that maybe you had a little too much caffeine that day? Maybe you had 2 pops instead of 1.
Yeah.
It's possible, right? It's quite possible. And this leads to all kinds of crazy behavior issues, right? What it also does is increase blood pressure. But before I get on to that, I want to talk about the agitation and aggressiveness. Kids that can become dependent on this caffeine through development are 20 times more likely to develop anger issues later in life that are uncontrollable, where they will lose their temper for no reason at the drop of a hat. Did you know that?
No.
Yes, and actually they say about according to American Psychological Society, they say that about 70% of adults that have anger issues, that are going to psychologists and therapists for anger issues, can be traced back to a caffeine dependency from as young as 12 years old.
Yeah.
As to their anger issues. Yeah, and there's no way they can focus. I'm getting to that, Ms. Rose. So it can cause long-term anger issues. It can cause increase in blood pressure. It can cause belly aches. It can cause rambling thoughts, which is where they cannot track what they're thinking. It can cause very ADD, ADHD-like symptoms in children, where they start having trouble staying on track. They start having trouble thinking. And, a lot of kids, particularly teenagers, and a lot of parents seem to think that, well, maybe a little caffeine will help them focus. It does not help them focus. It does make their thoughts clearer, but it makes them less in control of their thoughts, which means that they can't control what it is they're paying attention to. It is some scary statistics, Tasha. It really is, considering how much soda is marketed to kids. Absolutely. It also causes increased anxiety levels in children. It makes kids like you very, very nervous and anxious and want to perform better, right? It can create uncontrollable muscle twitches and tics, such as, handshakes, facial tics, and things along those lines. It can create heart arrhythmia. This is the more dangerous one. That's when your heartbeat doesn't beat at a steady rhythm, but will skip a beat here and there. It's like your heart stops for a split second at a time, and that can lead to early age heart attacks, and it can lead to early age heart problems, and it can even lead to hospitalization and death. It can kill you. Absolutely, caffeine addiction can kill you. All right. One of the other things is psychomotor agitation. So caffeine in children of above 100 milligrams per day can cause psychomotor agitation. And what that means is they can't sit still. They can't sit still, they can't stop moving, and if you try to force them to stop, they will become agitated, aggressive, and fight back because they physically and mentally cannot do it. That's another effect of too much caffeine in children, right? On top of that, one of the things I found out is that caffeine itself has absolutely zero nutritional value.
Man.
None whatsoever. It's not needed in our diet at all, and it can be a really expensive habit. So let's say that I just start letting you drink any kind of pops you want, or maybe I'll start giving you energy drinks and stuff. Would you really want to go through these side effects?
No.
No, that's pretty tough, right? That's pretty tough. On top of that, let's say you carry on that addiction to adulthood, which is exactly what happened to me. I got addicted to caffeine at around 10, 12 years old. You know what happens when it carries on into adulthood?
No.
Your average caffeine drink costs between $2 and $4. If you drink one of those per day, that's between $60 and $110 per month. If you drink two of them a day, which is the more likely if you're addicted, you're spending $200 a month. That's as much as some people's car payment. You could buy a car for that amount, right? That is crazy. Mr. Ace Face, when you said it could kill you. I missed that. Do not allow Jody Mountain Dew or any other caffeinated sodas due to all the skills, but now I'll know to limit it to one or none per day. Yeah, exactly. And that's one of the reasons I think, me and Axel talked about caffeine addiction before, and I believe it was one of the reasons that you decided to stop selling caffeinated drinks in your store, didn't you?
Yeah.
And so his stores are full of non-caffeinated pops. Now those still have sugar in them, they still have a high sugar content, but they take away the addictive side effects that caffeine can have. And so it's a little bit safer. Now, the thing is if kids drink that amount of caffeine for 3 to 5 days straight, and then they try to take it away, quick cold turkey as they say, they will experience extreme withdrawal symptoms for up to 10 days. They are equated to the same type of withdrawal symptoms that an adult will experience if they try to kick a heroin habit. That's nuts. Heroin's one of the hardest drugs there is out there. It really messes people up, can kill people. Heroin, one of the things that's really dangerous about heroin is if someone gets addicted to that for too long and then tries to get off of it, the withdrawal alone can kill them. And so they have to be weaned off of it slowly. That's the dangers of some of the hard drugs out there, which we've talked about some of them before. We didn't talk about them by name so much. We've talked about some of them before. So what can those withdrawal symptoms look like? Extreme headaches and tension headaches, which should have been my sign when I was about 17 years old and started getting tension headaches really bad. Insomnia, inability to sleep, irritability and agitation. And by the way, insomnia, I've learned recently because I just recently got diagnosed with insomnia. Did you know that?
No.
I did, by a psychiatrist. Insomnia is not just the inability to fall asleep, stay asleep. Insomnia can also be where one can fall asleep just fine, but does not cycle through the sleep cycles properly and therefore does not rest. Have you ever fallen asleep and it's just like as soon as you fell asleep, blink, it's like you woke up and you were just as tired as when you fell asleep?
Yeah.
That can be a symptom of insomnia. If it happens regularly, like all the time, like every night, it becomes a symptom of insomnia because your body and brain are not actually resting. You're spending your whole night in deep sleep. Crazy, right? So insomnia, irritability, lethargy, and lack of energy, that's a huge one that comes with caffeine withdrawal, and depression. A child can get very depressed and start having suicidal thoughts during caffeine withdrawal, and that can last up to 10 days after taking their caffeine away. Yes, please don't medicate your children or self without knowing if ADHD or ADD exists and a doctor's approval. Children's brains and bodies are still developing. That's absolutely right. Now, I will say on the adverse side of this that there have been some studies that say that there might be some amount of positive effects from caffeine on truly ADD or ADHD children. However, it's also estimated that 25% of those diagnoses are misdiagnosed due to a caffeine dependency being the cause rather than an actual issue of ADD or ADHD. However, if a child actually does have ADD or ADHD, a small amount of caffeine, such as 25 milligrams a day or 6 ounces of pop, has been shown to have maybe possibly some benefits to ADHD. So that just goes to show you that addiction doesn't necessarily, something can be addicting doesn't necessarily mean it's bad, does it?
No.
It just means you don't want to have what?
Caffeine.
Too much.
Yeah.
You don't want to have too much. Caffeine's not a bad thing, but you don't want to have too much. That's it. Anything in moderation. Now, the withdrawal symptoms can often lead to more caffeine again, which builds a dependency cycle that can last for years and even a lifetime, because you wake up feeling tired, so you think, well, that caffeine makes me feel more energetic, so you drink more caffeine. But in all reality, caffeine does not give you more energy. It just releases chemicals in the brain to make you think that your body has more energy than it does. This can also lead to physically hurting yourself. Because let's say you work out a lot, right? You work out and you do this 3 days in a row, and you wake up feeling tired, and you drink a bunch of caffeine thinking that's going to help you, and then suddenly you feel energetic, you get that psychomotor agitation we were talking about, can't stop moving, you decide to work out again. It is quite possible that you will end up unknowingly, without even realizing it, pushing your body way past the safe limits and tearing muscles, breaking bones, and destroying your tendons. And you don't even realize it because the fake energy feeling from the caffeine, you don't realize that your body is trying to send you signals to say you're overworking. Because it is such a thing, you can overwork, right? You've seen that. You've seen people overwork before and do things. Does not boost energy in kids. It impedes the perception of fatigue and stimulates the parts of the brain that produce anger, excitement, and risky behavior. It can cause your children to feel more risky, and this is the same in adults, right? I think I pretty much covered most of the notes that I had. I found it really, really interesting, but it can be dangerous enough to lead to hospitalizations and even death, especially if you're looking at 300 milligrams or more a day for an adult or 200 more milligrams a day for a child. So either way, 300 milligrams a day, let's put that in perspective. That's about 6 cans of soda. That's about 6 cans of soda. This is about the equivalent of well, if you go with the little 8-ounce coffee, is like out of a Keurig or whatever, you know, that's about 6 of those. It's like less than 2 from a gas station if you get one of the big 24-ounce ones or whatever. So it does not take much to develop this dependency, and this dependency can cause you to have all kinds of other mental health issues when in the end it might just be your dependency on caffeine that might be the problem. Did you know all of that about caffeine? No. One kid who had focus issues, Dr. Menner would give him a little bit of coffee in the morning. Yes, they did find that a tiny amount can possibly help. 2 to 3 ounces in hot chocolate in the morning helped him. But if he had soda with it, he was a crazy, angry rage monster. Yeah, and that's exactly what I was talking about. Thought it was high sugar content, but maybe it was a combination of overdose caffeine. Well, according to the American Psychological Association, caffeine will cause that kind of behavior in children. So next time you try to think about, and this, I'm talking to fathers here, right? Fathers in particular, we tend to be really, really pushy with our kids when it comes to sports, when it comes to physical ability, when it comes to trying our hardest and staying focused. I know I've been guilty of that. Would you say I've been guilty of being a little pushy sometimes?
You have.
Yeah, I have. I've really tried to back down on that the past few years. How am I doing recently?
You've been doing really good.
Cool. Because like I said in a live video a few years ago when I kind of realized it was a problem, being a parent is more about being the support, not the coach. If you try to pretend to be the coach instead of being the supporting shoulder, you can cause kids to get unmotivated and want to quit because they feel bad about their performances. If you think caffeine is enhancing their performance, think again. All you're really doing is building a dependency that's almost as dangerous as hard drugs. Yet, it's perfectly legal and 100% unregulated, which means Mr. Axel here could walk into the store and buy a Red Bull if he wanted to and drink it, and no one would stop him. No one would do anything. But the amount of caffeine in a Red Bull for a kid his age is enough to completely spiral him out of control. Even a small one is enough to completely make you aggressive, make you agitated, make you dependent on it for one, make you lose sleep, make you very anxious and nervous, make you so jittery that you cannot stop to sit still, make it so that you cannot read, do schoolwork, or focus. That sounds kind of dangerous, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Completely unregulated. Yeah. So I want to get on here and talk about addiction a little bit. So after we've went over that, Axel, do you have any thoughts about maybe caffeine or maybe addiction in general? Because you can become addicted to lots of things. You can become addicted to alcohol, nicotine, gaming, gambling, caffeine, lots of stuff out there, right?
Yeah.
Sugar is not listed as one of them. I will say that sugar is not listed as a certifiable addiction out there. So chocolate either. They're not on the list. I double checked that this morning. So what are your thoughts when it related to addiction?
I can't think of anything.
Can't think of anything? Would it make you think twice after hearing this about drinking a soda?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, or more than one anyway. Yeah, absolutely. So these things can be super, super dangerous. And I wanted to do this video because it's come to my attention that we have some parents in our school who have been, maybe even during classes, pushing caffeine on their children when they start to look a little lethargic or like they aren't paying attention. I just wanted to bring out the facts of the situation, and the fact is that they may be lethargic and not paying attention due to the consumption of caffeine. So it's something to think about if you want to make sure to raise your child healthy and to not rely or be dependent on something as they grow older, right? Because the thing is it's easier to set good habits than it is to stop bad ones, especially when it comes to addiction. I myself have battled and beaten about five different addictions in my life, 5 different highly addictive things in my life. And I'll tell you what, it is extremely hard. Withdrawal symptoms are extremely hard. The cravings are extremely hard to deal with. They will turn you into a whole nother person who is not who you wanted to be. And here's the thing, I had to do it the hard way. Most of the addictions that I kicked when I was homeless because I couldn't afford them, because addictions can be extremely expensive, right? So I also mentioned that gaming can be addictive, right? But gaming can also be a good thing, and this is where it's important to talk about addictions. Gaming can be a good thing too. Just like reading a book, gaming can be an escape from the world for a little while where you get to be a part of the story, like you're a character in the story, right? That's one of the things I like about gaming. So let me ask you, after hearing all this, if we were talking about gaming, what do you think would be a healthy level of playing video games? A healthy amount to play?
I think at least 10 minutes of playing the game and 15 minutes of the break.
10 minutes of playing game, 15 minutes rest. You're very close to what the American Psychological Association recommends. They recommend for every 20 to 30 minutes of play, a 10 to 15 minute break. You are very, very close to what they recommended. Very close. What about throughout a day? How many hours a day total do you think is a safe amount to play, even if you're taking the breaks the way you say?
Maybe an hour.
1 to 2 hours. 1 to 2 hours is safe play for kids age 6 to 11. You can go 2.5 for 12 and up through adults, right? Again, all this information was pulled from the American Psychological Association. I found it very, very interesting. Addiction is the hardest thing you will ever live through, Tasha. I fully understand. I have been addicted to some of the hardest addictions to break. I still struggle with 1 or 2 here and there, but I'm doing very, very well in comparison. So yes, and can buy energy drinks, not realizing because they thought they were pretty, exactly, because they put the pretty colors on them, right? The Red Bull gives you wings advertisement. I mean, as a kid, you've seen those ads, right? The whole Red Bull gives you wings. Did that make you in some way or fashion think, oh, maybe I'd like to try that?
Not really.
Not for you?
Nah.
Didn't get you, huh? I've heard a lot of kids say that it does, though, because kids get kind of attached to the slogan. You studied advertising with me, though, so you can kind of see past the slogans. But you also should, because you studied advertising with me, you probably also understand the effectiveness of a good slogan. It gets stuck in your head, doesn't it? And then when you're at the store, it's what you think of. You see that, and you're like, oh, Red Bull gives you wings, you know, and it's a good slogan. Like our slogan is teammate, or be the best at being you. So, yeah, those are absolutely things. Person who is addicted to the thing and the family, friends who are supporting them. Exactly. And that's why this comes back to what I said at the beginning of the video. This relates to several of our words of the week, not the least of which, discipline, patience, and compassion, especially if you're a family member trying to help someone with addiction, particularly if you're a parent trying to help a child with an addiction, whether it's an electronics addiction, whether it's a nicotine addiction, or whatever it is. Those first 10 days are a serious problem. And the thing is once you've been addicted to something, it is now 5 to 10 times harder from there on out for the rest of your life. It becomes harder to use that thing in moderation. So if I became addicted to alcohol, for example, then it means that once I beat the addiction, it takes between 20 days to 5 years, depending on how long you were addicted. And once that addiction is beat, it means that even if I just want to use it in a safe, moderate amount, if I start to, I could very quickly relapse and go right back to my addiction again just from a small amount. So once someone has become severely dependent on something, such as caffeine, and let's say you go through all the withdrawal symptoms and you got family that helps you through your caffeine dependency. Problem is that since you've been addicted once, your body will remember that. So let's say you go 5 years not addicted to it anymore, but then you pick up a pop. It's very easy to turn around and pick up a second one, and within 3 to 5 days realize that you're right back in your original addiction again. It's crazy how that happens. But as long as you never get that addictive phase and deal with the withdrawal symptoms in the first place, then you could enjoy a little bit in moderation. Then you could enjoy a little bit of caffeine in moderation. You can enjoy a little bit of gaming in moderation, a little bit of alcohol in moderation, whatever it might be, right? Even gambling. Gambling is something I cannot do. I cannot gamble. I will not gamble, and I will not set foot in a casino unless it's just to visit a friend or play some pool if they got a pool table or something like that. I will not go anywhere near slot machines because I became addicted to gambling at the age of 18, and I suffered with that until the age of 21 years old. Addiction to gambling, right? It started off with going in and, I'll only spend $5, I'll only spend $10. And then one day I was broke and I was down to the last $10 to my name, had several bills coming due, I couldn't afford them. I took my $10 in a casino, I walked out of there with $450, $440, and managed to pay off all my bills. So the next time I ran out of money, guess what I did?
You went to casino.
And I won again. And I paid off all my bills. But the next time I went, I didn't need to win. I had my bills paid. I told myself I'd just spend $20. You want to guess what happened?
You spent all your money.
I spent my entire paycheck within an hour of getting it. And then I continued to do this every 2 weeks for several months. I would win, but I'd turn around and put it right back in. That's addicted because it wasn't enough. It's not enough. That's the thing with addiction. Once you get addicted to something, it's never enough. You feel like you can never have enough of it. So to this day, I can't enjoy going and playing some blackjack or some cards at the casino because if I do, I know full and well I will fall back into that addiction and I will lose all my money.
Man.
So now I have to be very careful about that, if that kind of helps put things into perspective a little bit. Yep, things I will never go near again because of relapse risk. That, and I have several other things too, but I'm not going to talk about those here on this live video. But, so if you're the person dealing with addiction, Axel, say you're dealing with an addiction. You're dealing with these withdrawal symptoms, the headaches, the insomnia, the irritability, the cravings. You just got to have it. How can discipline help you fight that?
Try your best not to pick them up.
Trying your best not to pick them up.
To not have them again.
One of the helpful things for me was trying my best to distract myself to stop thinking about it, to find something else to do to stop thinking about it, right? That was a good one. How do you think that if you were addicted to something, how do you think that patience helps? This is a little more in-depth than discipline.
Can't think of it.
Patience, to accept. First up, you have to accept that you might be addicted, that you might have a problem. If you can't accept that you have a problem, you're not going to be willing to take the really, really hard steps to beat it. Second, you have to be willing to accept it if you fall off the wagon, as they say, and relapse to your thing. And you have to be willing to forgive yourself. That's a huge part of patience. Got to be willing to forgive yourself and try again and try again and try again until you beat it, right? How about compassion? How does that relate if you're trying to kick an addiction?
Trying to care for yourself and caring for yourself.
So like having enough self-respect to want to be healthy and to not want to have all your thoughts dependent on this substance you have to pay somebody for and make somebody else rich just so you can have it. Yeah. Compassion, that'd be a big thing. Caring for self-respect. What about compassion? Say you're the one dealing with addiction. What about compassion for your family members? Because remember, what's one of the symptoms of addiction that can really hurt your family members? Do you remember?
Being angry and
irritable and in just a bad mood regularly. That probably hurts your loved ones, doesn't it? Hurts their feelings. Whatever. Hurts their feelings, right? So how can compassion help with that?
Compassion can help you care about them. Try to
Remind yourself that,
remind yourself to care about your family as well.
and that you want to be good to your family, don't you?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, no, that's great. Now let's talk about if you were trying to help someone else with addiction. Let's say you're not addicted. You know I've been addicted to some things, right? Or let's say you have a friend. I think that's a better one. Let's say you have a friend that's addicted to something, and they finally realize that they have a bit of a problem. How can discipline help you help them kick the habit?
Try my best to, like, if they pick something up they're addicted to, telling them to not drink it or put it down, or
I don't know that that's usually helpful. When you tell someone not to do something, remember that becomes the only thing they think about
Yeah.
doing. So maybe we could change that into trying our best to distract them away from it and get them doing something else or thinking about something else before they fall back into it. Yeah, that would be a good one. How about patience? Because let's face it, if you got a friend that's addicted, they're going to be more irritable. They're going to be harder to play with because they're going to bounce all over the place. They're going to be super anxious. You're going to have a hard time keeping up with them. How can patience help you help them?
Well, one is accepting how they are, for one.
Accepting the fact that of how they are and that their behavior is not 100% their fault. Their behavior at that point is partially the fault of the dependency and the addiction, yes?
Yes.
Because that is a biopsychological disorder. So once you accept them, then maybe you don't feel the sting as much if they lash out at you, right? You're just like, oh, that's just the addiction talking. And you can kind of pass it off a little bit more, right? How about compassion? How will compassion help you in those cases?
Caring about your friend, trying to help him or her.
And well, it's not about just helping them so much as it is about helping them help themselves.
Yes.
And that's like the whole point of our martial arts school, right? We put people through challenges. We make them do hard things to help them realize who they can be, just how strong they can be. And I think the same thing is reflected when we're talking about addiction. Accepting their behavior is not them, but that their behavior is part of the disorder.
Yeah.
Right? Some people call it a disease. It's not technically a disease. It's technically a disorder. But it is a very physical disorder that affects the brain and physiology. Absolutely. The brain and body. So this is a hard talk to have, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's kind of a hard talk to have, especially with your kids. That's why I kind of wanted to do this live a little bit. He didn't really have any, I didn't pre-frame him really much at all. I just told him we were going to be talking about addiction. But it can be a hard conversation to have for parents, absolutely. Absolutely, because sometimes it comes to admitting that maybe we were wrong in our thoughts about something, and maybe telling our kids, hey, I am going to have to start regulating your caffeine usage. And then the thing is if you get to, or your gaming usage or whatever, and if it gets to that point, you have got to learn to apologize as an authority figure. You've got to learn to come to them and say, I think you have a bit of a problem with too much gaming, too much electronics, too much caffeine, and we're realizing it's a problem, and I'm going to have to start regulating how much you have. And I am truly sorry that it is a little bit my fault for allowing you in the first place to have too much of this, because now I have enabled you to get addicted, and now it's going to take both of us to bring you back.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's a very difficult conversation to have. It's an even more difficult conversation. It's still a difficult conversation to have, even if there's not an addiction to deal with. Axel's not really addicted to anything, though he has come close with electronics a couple times. Usually within 1 or 2 days of him having too much, I'll notice the irritability. That's your first symptom. And I think in telling you that and letting you know that your first symptom is you start to get irritable and angry over every little tiny thing helps you to recognize when you've begun to have too much of something.
Yeah.
How do you think that's going to help you as an adult, learning how to recognize when maybe you've had too much?
It'll help me from getting away from addictions that I might have as an adult.
It'll remind you to do things in moderation, and you'll become more self-aware when you start to display addictive behaviors. You'll be able to recognize it in yourself and won't have to rely on other people to tell you. You'll begin to recognize in myself, man, I've been really irritable lately. I've also been having some trouble sleeping. I've been feeling really tired. You know what? I did drink a lot of cups of coffee the other day. Through the last few days. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe I need to cut down my coffee before that 5-day mark when it becomes an addiction. If you can catch yourself in the first 3 days when you're already showing symptoms, then you can avoid that addiction altogether, can't you?
Yeah. The days that I drank quite a bit of coffee, those are the days I felt those symptoms.
Mm-hmm,
I can barely say.
Yeah. But you've never really had enough. Well, I say that back. I would say you never really had enough caffeine to make that the case, but that's not true. I've seen you drink a 16-ounce soda before. And also, one day you had tried a little bit of coffee. It was more than a safe amount of coffee. You were more than safe, but if I remember right, you might have had a pop later that day. And boom, that's it, shot you over the mark of what's considered safe, which again is 40 milligrams of caffeine for kids age 6 to 11, more like 100 milligrams for kids that are teenagers, 12 to 17, 150 to 200 milligrams is getting a little out there, unsafe for adults, right? So having these conversations with Axel or a child at being a young age, I mean, not like 5, but he's, how old are you again?
9.
22? 9, that's right. He's 9. Having a conversation at the ages, 8, 9, 10, 11 can help save them a lot of trouble through their teen years and peer pressure. So you're going to feel, once you know that what can happen to you, you're probably going to feel a little less pressured by other people telling you should do it anyway, aren't you? And then on top of that, it builds the coping mechanisms. It builds the ability for him to start to recognize himself when he's starting to have some of the symptoms so that he can learn to backtrack it. Now, of course, he's going to make mistakes. He's a child. That's what his parents are here for. We're here to remind him, hey, you're getting a little out of hand. I noticed you're having trouble focusing. You're having trouble sitting still. And she's laughing at my calling you 22. Knowing the signs in you helps recognize things before it's a problem. That's exactly right. And that's why it's so important to have these conversations with our kids at an early enough age, 8, 9, 10, 11, before it becomes a problem while they're at school that we don't even recognize, that we don't even see happening. And then it's easy. If a kid starts drinking a bunch of pops at school around the age of 10 to 12 years old, we may not recognize it. We don't know they're drinking all that pop, and we may not even recognize it. We just notice they're getting irritable at home, they're starting to get really moody, they're not sleeping as well. And we might just pass it off as hormones because of puberty, because of their age, when in all reality, it might be a dependency on caffeine beginning and starting to build, which can lead to a lifetime dependency that can cost you upwards of $200 to $300 a month. You could buy a brand new car for that. For the amount of money I spent on caffeine when I was 20 years old, driving an old beater car that would barely run, I could have bought a brand new car. Yes, a low value, cheap one, but a brand new car for that amount of money. Looking back on that, I realized the mistakes that I made, and I realize Axel's going to make his own mistakes too. He's not always going to listen to me. But by sharing my mistakes, it might prevent him from making as many of his own so that he can move a little bit farther than I did in my life, a little bit faster too, right? So he can realize these issues and recognize them before they can become problems again, right? So a lot of this was about caffeine, which, like I say, caffeine addiction can happen very, very easily in children, and it's completely unregulated. One more time, I just want to go over the symptoms. Do you remember any of the symptoms?
Irritable.
Being irritable and angry.
And not sleeping as well.
Not sleeping as well and waking up tired and more fatigued, which causes a person to want more caffeine, which is one of the big problems with builds dependency. Anything else you can think of that you remember?
No.
Rambling thoughts and the inability to control what you're thinking about. Things bounce, blah, blah, blah. Becoming anxious and nervous and scared quite often. Becoming jittery so you can't stop moving. Those don't sound so fun, do they?
No.
No, not at all. Do you remember the most dangerous one?
The heart skipping a beat.
Heart arrhythmia, where your heart starts beating at irregular heartbeats and skipping beats and things like that, which can lead to blood pressure issues, can lead to clotting issues, can lead to heart attacks and hospitalizations and even death. And as little as 300 milligrams of caffeine a day for an extended period of time can cause that. Absolutely can, especially for those who are more genetically predisposed to it, right? What are some of the symptoms? Can you remember any of the symptoms that let you know maybe you have a bit of an addiction problem? I mean, those are some of the symptoms that let you know. Oh, sorry, not addiction. I asked the wrong question. What are some things that once you become addicted to something, you might have to deal with to get off of it, also known as withdrawal symptoms? What are some of the withdrawal symptoms of something like caffeine, for example? Actually, most most addictions have very similar withdrawal symptoms.
Yeah.
It's more just the severity of the symptoms that changes
Yeah.
based on what you're addicted to.
So with video games, I was addicted with video games, and the video games got took away from me, and the symptoms were for me begging for where it was hidden so I could play on it again.
Uncontrollable cravings, right? At that time, now normally you'd never go behind our back. You'd always be really honest with us. But at that time, did you consider going behind our back to play your games and try to not get caught? Be honest. It's okay. No one's in
Yeah.
trouble here. Yeah, absolutely. I understand that because I've done the same thing. I do understand that. That is a huge withdrawal symptom. It is a tough one. Can you remember any other withdrawal symptoms?
I really can't.
Lack of energy,
Oh, yeah, definitely.
depression, being uncontrollably sad for no reason and upset at everything, headaches, particularly tension headaches where your neck will hurt first and then your head starts to hurt. Your whole head and neck gets all like a pounding headache.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
really, really a
That
terrible,
happens
terrible headache to
with
have.
me.
You've experienced that before. I know you have. And insomnia. What is insomnia?
Insomnia? Oh.
Oh, you kind of already brought this one up. It's the lack of ability to sleep properly.
Yeah.
It's not always the lack of ability to sleep at all. Sometimes it can be. Like me, I got recently diagnosed with insomnia. I had a hard time falling asleep. I got that, but I recognized that after I got up 2 or 3 times, I could fall asleep, and I'd still get like 6-7 hours, and I thought that was fine, right? But my 6-7 hours of sleep on a sleep study showed that I was not cycling through my sleep as properly. I was just going through deep sleep, so it was just like closing my eyes, and boom, I'm awake and really, really tired. And I didn't even realize how dark the circles had gotten under my eyes until I started being treated for it. When I started being treated for the insomnia, that all disappeared. I started feeling so much better. I started dreaming again, which can be a good or bad thing, depending on if you like your dreams or not. But I actually feel like sleep takes some time now instead of just like blinking and I'm awake, you know. That's crazy. So those are some withdrawal symptoms, and those can be really, really hard because most things that are addictive dump feel-good chemicals in your brain. And when those chemicals dump in your brain, it can make it feel good to do certain things. So then when the next time you feel bad and you're craving feeling good, you'll do them again. And you'll do them again. You'll do them again until you start doing too much, right?
Yeah.
This is what causes addiction. When in all reality, life is meant to be a balance. Balance in all things. That's what our logo represents. Which means that you're not really, truly experiencing life unless you allow yourself to be sad sometimes.
Yeah.
Unless you allow yourself to be frustrated sometimes. Unless you allow yourself to be whatever it might be, right? Unless you push yourself to do some things you don't want to do, then you're not really experiencing life to its fullest. If you're not letting yourself feel the bad emotions, if every time you feel a bad emotion you think, I'm going to go play a video game, I'm going to go do this, I'm going to do that, it can build a dependency. But at the same time, it also is important to escape sometimes. So anything in moderation. It is important to sometimes escape to that video game. Maybe have a little caffeine, maybe whatever, as long as you know exactly how much is safe and you stay under that. Then you'll be fine. Absolutely fine. Anything in moderation. I skipped several comments here. Special thing about this dojo is push people through the hard things we never really thought we could overcome in a way that's still entirely supportive. And that's the goal, right? That's the goal. Not necessarily to force anybody to do anything, but to try to convince them that it's worth the effort to try and that it is okay if they fail. And that it is okay to try again until they succeed. And that's really, really important. Ms. Rosen said, the kind of acceptance is important. A child or person is not necessarily their behavior. Those behaviors could be caused by something else. So a kid isn't necessarily bad just because they behaved badly. The behavior is unacceptable and bad, not the child. And I've talked to Axel about this before. I don't know if you remember. You were probably like 6 last time I talked about this with you. You do realize that, right? That if you do something bad, and we get on to you for doing something bad, it is not you that was bad. It was what you did. It was the one thing. That does not make you bad. That does not make you as a person somehow terrible because you made a mistake. We all make mistakes. It made the one behavior bad, but it doesn't make it all bad. It doesn't make you all bad, right? It's just a guiding correction, right, to bring you back around to the best that you can be. Knowing the signs of health was a problem, I think I already got that one. That's the reason they're so highly addictive is because they dump all the feel-good chemicals. Absolutely. All right, so this has been my video on addiction. I hope this helps somebody out there. or maybe whether it's a person struggling with addiction themselves, if you are an adult struggling with addiction and you need someone to talk to and you've been trying to beat that addiction, feel free to reach out to me. This is something that I do happen to have a whole lot of experience in, and it does require a good network of supportive people. This is why group therapy for addictions can be really, really helpful, so you get to meet other people who struggle with the same addiction and feel completely understood. It's important when you're struggling with something to talk to people and be around people who understand exactly how you feel, who have done it and been there before. Feel free to reach out to me. If you notice these signs in your child, feel free to reach out and get some advice from us if you want. But most of all, I hope that you just take this live video seriously, maybe take a close look at what you've been doing and see if there's any adjustments that maybe you might need to make for yourself or for your children to help give them a better opportunity than what you were given when you started life and did not have this information in front of you. The most powerful thing you can give a child is the information that you did not have as a child, so that they can make better decisions for themselves. Don't avoid these conversations just because they're hard to have. These are the important conversations. The harder it feels to have a conversation, the more important it is to have that conversation so that they can feel better prepared. After having this discussion, do you feel better prepared to approach things that can be addictive?
Yeah.
You think so?
Definitely.
And remind yourself to stay in moderation with things?
Yes.
Most things are relatively good for you in a small amount. It's when you overdo it that it becomes a problem. And even the things that aren't listed by American Psychological Society as clinical addictions can still be a little bit addicting and can be addictive behaviors. Just because we mostly talked about caffeine and gambling because we do deal a lot with kids and alcohol and nicotine, doesn't mean that other behaviors can't also be slightly addictive due to the fact that it's making you feel good. So realistically, I think it's better to talk about the symptoms of addiction and the symptoms of withdrawal that they would fight if they had to deal with an addiction when it comes to addiction, so that they can understand those things no matter what the behavior is that they are doing. Because there's other addictions, even ones listed on the American Psychological Society that I won't even mention on here because we're a kid-friendly group and a kid-friendly thing, but there are several addictions adults and things deal with that involve adult things and stuff like that. It can be a serious struggle. But they're not bad things. They're not bad things. If you do them from time to time, you do them occasionally. It's when you start to rely on them, become aggressive when you don't have it, start to go behind people's backs and hurt the people you love in order to get it. That's when you may need to take a closer look. And if you notice your child performing those kinds of behaviors, watch this video again, go through those things, have this talk with them. Understand that if you start to put rules in place, that they will likely try to go behind your back, they will likely have severe withdrawal symptoms, and you're going to have to be patient with them. Don't yell at them and make them feel terrible for their addiction. Instead, remind them how strong they can be without it. Remind them that it is only temporary. The withdrawal symptoms are only temporary, and as long as they make it to 10 to 20 days later, they can make it back to as strong as they once were. So until we see you guys again, be the best teammates you can be.
Be the best at being you.